Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Thursday, April 3rd. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined by RCP White House correspondent Phil Wegmann and RCP senior elections analyst Sean Trende. So the world is reacting to Trump's tariff announcement. He has put a baseline 10% tariff on all imports from all countries and a universal 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. The effective tariff rate on China is estimated by Citibank to be around 65%. That's up from about 20% in 2021. Other Asian trading partners have been hit almost as hard. So, Phil, you wrote about this on today's RCP front page. How is the White House reacting to the reaction to the tariffs?
This morning, about an hour before markets opened on Wall Street, Donald Trump tweeted that the patient is doing well, the prognosis is good, and he likened himself to a physician who just did what needed to be done, that the surgery is now over and recovery can begin. But we're not even at the end of the beginning here. The rates that you just discussed, Andy, those are orders of magnitude higher than even Donald Trump presented on the campaign trail. There was a time when he was flirting with the idea of across the board tariffs of 10 or 20%. This is much more than that. It's 10% across the board. And then the White House rolled out this new equation, and there's a lot of questions about just how they made these calculations. It includes not just the tariffs that other nations are charging the United States, but also allegedly what they're doing with their monetary supply and other ways that these countries are cheating, according to a White House official who previewed all of this before us. And so that's how you end up getting something like, the 50% plus tariff on China, but not even just on adversaries. We're looking at a 20% tariff on the EU, similar neighborhood for Japan. This is the sort of thing that has the markets reacting very poorly. The last analysis I saw showed that I think something like $2 trillion had been just wiped off the ledger there. And this is significant because, this is Donald Trump's big bet. The economists say that tariffs are taxes, that they don't spur growth. He says that they're going to allow the United States to renew manufacturing and that this is going to lead to a renaissance. He's going with his gut over economic orthodoxy for the last, 30, 40 years. And something that struck me yesterday as he made that announcement from the Rose Garden, he was up there alone. This is his legacy. It has to work, or, I think that this will be, the final chapter in, his political elegy.
Wow. Final chapter. That's harsh judgment from Phil Wegmann there. But Sean, it does seem that it's this, it's a race, isn't it, between the sort of short-term pain, higher prices, uncertainty, falling stock market, and what the president at least sees in the longer term, which, as Phil said, is return to manufacturing jobs, increase in revenue to the U.S. government from these tariffs, could reduce the national debt. Sean, what is your sense of what the voters will put up with and for how long?
Well, I think the thing the Republicans have going for them is that the voters don't get their say for 18 months. So there's a little bit of time for this to work it out. The problem is, to the extent this is a long-term play, it's got some problems. And these are like debates we were having in 1970 and 1980, right? Like trying to shore up the U.S. automobile industry. I'm surprised he isn't talking about steel. And I think, look, I'm not a kind of orthodox person on this. I'm someone, I think the economic analysis is what it is, and it's probably right, but I don't think economic policy has to be the only consideration. I think if I could go back and unwind some of the deregulation of the last 40, 50 years, I'd probably do it. But it's not clear at all clear you can put that genie back in the bottle. Just because low tariffs helped hollow out American manufacturing, it doesn't follow that if you put tariffs back in place, manufacturing is going to return. So, he's got about 18 months. If we get pushed into a long-term recession by this and there isn't tangible gain or benefit back on the U.S. side, then Republicans have a lot of splaining to do in the midterm elections.
Well, Phil, there are some people who think that this is a negotiating ploy still. It's a smaller and smaller group of people, I think, but there are people who are saying, no. What's really happening here is he's pushing other countries to reform their tariffs, drop them, and we will end up with an even better, more freer trade regime at the end of this than we have right now. Do you buy that, or do you think that, is there anyone in the White House who's promising that at this point?
Israel, for instance, they thought that that was the deal, and they announced that they were going to be lowering their tariff rate to 0 with the United States, only to discover that they were on that list of nations who were going to face repercussions yesterday. So it's not as advertised just yet. What I was struck by, though, is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. His message to the rest of the world was, don't try and put retaliatory tariffs on the United States. What we're seeing right now is currently the high water mark, and later we can have a negotiation. But the White House, sometimes they seem to be of two minds. Are these tariffs meant to reshore manufacturing and rebuild that industrial base, or are they meant to achieve parity around the world? Donald Trump often sort of blurs those two in his discussion of these tariffs. And I think that, certainly there are a lot of folks on the right who are open to sort of more protectionism. That we've seen the economic orthodoxy sort of come under assault previously. We've already heard from this administration that they are of the opinion that cheap consumer goods are not the essence of the American dream, that they're not obsessed with whether the market increases by 0.5% or goes down 0.5% every day. They're looking at other things. But right now, there's so much confusion, not just in markets in the United States, but markets around the world, of what the rules of the road are, that it's going to take some time to, right the ship here. And look, I think that, some people who were cheering a 10% tariff, they might have even been taken aback by this new formula here, because, the byword right now really is uncertainty.
Yeah. But Sean, to that point, all this uncertainty, some of it seems to be manufactured by the White House itself. They sort of delayed this announcement and sort of did it after the markets close. And, is there a method to that as well politically, in that whatever happens, Trump can sort of pivot and declare victory? He'll drop the tariffs. He'll do something else. But whatever it is, he's going to say it worked because he's got the weave, and this is, he will end up weaving this to fit the narrative that he's got in his head.
I think there's some truth to that, but at the end of the day, the proof's in the pudding, right? Like, he can drop the tariffs, but if he's created so much uncertainty that we go into recession, or if there aren't more manufacturing jobs than there were in the past, people aren't particularly well informed, but they aren't stupid either. And, they know what's right in front of their eyes. So I think he has some ability to do that, but he's not Superman like some of his opponents make it out to be. And I think, the real story here is that uncertainty, because for better or for worse, markets hate uncertainty. And that is the source of wealth for a lot of Americans. People see their 401ks go down. They're not happy. They see a 25% tariff on things they buy, or 65% or whatever. So they see their prices go up in the store. And you could say that's not really inflation. That's the tariff. And people aren't going to make that distinction. They don't care. They just want their goods to be cheap again. So I think there's a lot of groundwork and storytelling that needed to take place to make this an effective policy. I think if it had been a little bit more select, I think Americans would endure a lot of pain for tariffs on China, because I think that's an easy story the White House could have told, that Americans are primed to buy because they don't view China as a friendly country. But trade war with Canada was not on anyone's bingo card, and I think that's a much tougher sell.
Well, yeah, Sean, you bring up the trade war with Canada, and we did have 4 Republican senators vote with the Democrats, sort of a symbolic vote, but to rescind those tariffs against Canada. Trump lashed out at them, told them to get in line. But Sean, what do you make of these 4 Republicans who bucked the president on this. And these are Mitch McConnell, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul, of course.
So you can tell a story with each one of them, right? Mitch McConnell is someone who's been in the Senate for a very long time, and he is an old school Republican. He's probably not running for re-election, and so I think he's tired of carrying water for Trump, and he's just going to vote like an old school Republican. Murkowski and Collins are both moderate Republicans. They have a long-standing view of this, and Rand Paul, I mean, for goodness sake, he's named after Ayn Rand. Like he's a libertarian.
Yeah, he is the senator from libertarian land. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you can see the story there, but I think it does show that there is some dissension in the ranks. It was a freebie, right? It was a symbolic vote. So there was no harm that they did by casting the vote, but I think it was a little bit maybe of a shot across the bow. But I could have probably named those 4 senators before I even found out who they were. It's when you start to see other senators, I think, switch sides that you start to think, okay, there really might be a rebellion coming.
Yeah, Phil, you see it that way?
I think so. No surprise that those are the ones who bucked the party line here. This is a symbolic vote. It's not going anywhere in the House because Speaker Mike Johnson, clearly he knows that his fate is tied to Donald Trump's. And, the Republican majority in the House, they are all in right now on this agenda. And we've seen a 180 from Republicans, not just in this latest episode, but over the last better part of a decade when it comes to trade. I think a moment ago, though, I just want to circle back to this point, which I think is really important, which you and Sean both hit on, which is that Donald Trump has a habit of, at any given moment, just sort of unilaterally declaring victory. And, then trying to get a hold of the narrative once again, despite what the facts might be. And that has been, really powerful for him. He has the largest megaphone in all of politics currently. But I think that perhaps this is different because you can't argue with the market. Like Sean said, people are going to be looking at their 401ks, and they might be willing to stomach some short-term losses if they think that it's for the good of the nation. Maybe they're thinking back to the pandemic, and they're of the opinion that, the United States shouldn't be so reliant on China. But if it's to, get the Canadians and the South Koreans and the Japanese and the Australians, our allies, in line, that might be more of a hard sell.
Yeah, well, we're going to keep an eye on this. I'm going to talk a little later in the program to John Tamny, who's the editor of Real Clear Markets, about this and get his view on this. So stick around for that. Anyway, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Phil and Sean. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Sean Trende and Phil Wegmann. And Sean, Mayor Eric Adams said today, Thursday, that he is opting out of the New York City Democratic primary. He'll stand for re-election as an independent, and this all comes just after a judge dismissed these charges against him on Wednesday. What he says now is, I have been this racehorse that has been held back. So, Sean, how do you view the race, and is he the strongest horse in the pack right now?
Yeah, I think there's a case to be made for it. First, he's someone who has always been a kind of, he was a Republican before. He's not someone who's afraid to change his stripes every now and again. Looks like he's doing it again. Now, as for an election, now he doesn't have to worry about a Democratic primary. He hopes that the Democrats nominate someone to the hard left, someone like de Blasio makes his way through the primary this time around, and then he can maybe co-opt Republicans who know that their guy, Kurt Silva, is not going to be mayor of New York anytime soon, and so he can hope to get their votes. That's I think the play for him, but there's a lot of contingency in there. You could have someone like Andrew Cuomo who's not crazy, win the Democratic primary, who gets a lot of normie Democratic votes in the general. But it's probably the only play he has left, given that he's now affiliated with the Trump administration de facto.
Yeah, he's got, Phil, about a 20% approval rating, which is not as low as some some other mayors, thinking of Chicago, but it's not a good rating, and it didn't look good for him in that Democratic primary, which is held June 24th, which lot of people think that's the race that really matters. But what do you make of him becoming an independent?
I can't remember a Democrat who succeeded with nearly the endorsement of Donald Trump. I think the last one who did was probably pre 2015. It was going to be tough for the mayor. Certainly, the way that he's been making headlines right now. Before the question of this trial is how is he going to be handling the federal government's push on illegal immigration. And certainly there were allegations that there was a quid pro quo with the mayor and the Department of Justice there. Now I think like this was the only option available to him. And I'm curious, does Trump give him an assist and tell Republicans not to bother spending all this money in a Republican primary and just back the mayor?
Well, there's only 600,000 registered Republicans in New York City. There's 3.3 million Democrats, 1.1 million independents, Sean. But it looks like, to me, the most likely thing is that it's Cuomo versus Adams versus maybe Silver or someone else come the fall. But to me, it seems like Cuomo would be the strongest horse in that race. But do you disagree?
Not at all. I think you'd have to like Cuomo's chances there. He's not someone who is so far out there that he's going to send business Democrats and kind of moderate Democrats running. And that's what Eric Adams needs, right? Like you just said, Eric Adams can win every Republican vote and every independent vote and still lose the general election. So Adams needs to make inroads with moderate Democrats. And for that to happen, he probably needs it to be someone who's not, I mean, Andrew Cuomo spent a lot of time being criticized by the left of his party for being too moderate. I mean, in New York terms, he may well be in the right half of the Democratic Party. So, yeah, I think that would be a very, very hard race for Adams to win.
Well, I want to switch topics a little bit here and talk about this event that's happening this weekend. Pretty interesting. Saturday is what's called a hands-off day. And according to Axios, this is expected to be the largest single-day protest against Trump since he entered office. The organizers of this event say they've got nearly 250,000 RSVPs. I like that. That's very waspy of them to sort of get RSVPs for these protests. But there are about 600 events across the country. And Elon Musk is at the center of a lot of their complaints, Phil. Does this signal that the resistance is getting its act together and that Elon Musk is sort of at the heart of what they're going after right now?
If they can pull off the party and everybody shows up, then sure. What we've seen for the first part of the second season of Donald Trump is that the resistance has been pretty anemic. There wasn't these protests in the streets. There weren't, resistance bureaucrats like there were during the first Trump administration. In fact, it's been pretty tame. And I think what the Democrats have discovered as they rally outside of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the Department of Education is that voters just don't care that much about federal employees losing their jobs. And they don't care that much about government agencies getting shut down.
You don't think that shutting down AID was sort of like mainstream up in arms?
It's going to be real unpopular in Iowa. I think that the difference here, though, is while the Trump administration prides itself on picking these 80-20 fights where the majority of the country is in their corner and they get Democrats to overreact, the trade war, it brings, more certainty to this. Now it's no longer an abstract thing. And so maybe that's the sort of gateway to some of these low propensity voters, to some of these independents to say, all right, well, like, look at the economy, look at your 401k. It's not going so hot. And oh, by the way, look at all of these other things that Doge has been doing. Elon Musk, the world's richest man, surely must be to blame.
Yeah. Sean, it does seem like Elon Musk is a lightning rod.
Yeah, I mean, he's been made into, he's kind of, you had the Koch brothers for a while. You had, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, the guy Soros on the left. I think Elon Musk is kind of the latest in the succession, but, I did some quick mental math, and 250,000 people RSVPing. Let's see how many actually show across 400 or 600 locations is like 400 people a location. Like even this now, granted, some will be they're not going to be evenly dispersed, but this is not, still doesn't sound like the mass protests we had at the beginning of Donald Trump's term. And the tariff thing is tricky for the Democratic Party because, frankly, there's a lot of Democratic Party voters, working class voters of color who are probably looking at this thinking, well, yeah, I want to put tariffs on the automobile industry, or yeah, let's stick it to China. Tariffs are an issue that cuts across party, and while this may invigorate the kind of new Democratic voter from the suburbs, and that's not nothing. I'm not sure it's not as clean cut of a winner as some other issues might be.
Yeah, it strikes me, Phil, that what they're missing is that sort of those social issues that Democrats have rallied around before. I'm thinking of the pink pussy hat ladies and that sort of thing. I mean, what really gets them motivated, let's face it, is abortion. That seems to have been the issue, and they don't have that, or they don't have that to the same degree as they once had. But they do have Elon Musk, and you do see at the White House, and I want to get Phil's take on this, that I can't quite figure it out. Is he going? Is he coming? Is he going to be a special advisor? What is happening with Elon Musk in the White House?
So Elon Musk, as a special government employee, he had about 6 months before he either had to make a decision of staying and filling out all the financial disclosures and becoming a permanent employee, or becoming a private citizen once again. There was a Politico story that some in the cabinet were eager that Elon Musk was going to be leaving. This wasn't much of a scoop, though, because the facts hadn't changed. Elon Musk's time in the administration was always limited. What we heard from the vice president this morning, though, during that Fox and Friends interview, is he said, when Elon Musk departs, he will still remain a close advisor and friend to the administration because the work of Doge and the work of Elon Musk is not over.
So, Sean, tell me what that means politically. Are they distancing themselves, but don't want to piss him off because he's the richest man in the world? Would they really like to see him gone, or are they, as Phil says, there is this time limit where you can be one of these special employees, I guess, and that time is coming. So he's got a convenient sort of off ramp. What's going on?
Yeah, this is the type of Kremlinology that is kind of a numbers data guy I'm just not that good at. And I'm not
You
sure.
underestimate your Kremlinology skills, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I how do you read between the lines on that? Because there is a perfectly good, straight-faced explanation for why he's going. He has to, or he has to submit to a degree of scrutiny that I don't think he probably wants. I think there's, probably concerns on Musk's part about the toll that this is taking on his business. He's ultimately someone that wants to build rocket ships and cars and build tunnels, not necessarily cut government. So there's a clear, straight-faced answer for this, and then there's a clear, this is all just a pretext and Musk is becoming too radioactive, so let's jettison him. And I honestly don't know which you believe without having more inside baseball and sources and stuff like that is probably kind of like what your prior view of it was.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, and Phil will find out all of this for us in the days and weeks ahead, so I appreciate that. Thanks to both of you, Phil and Sean. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and we're going to be back with more right after this. Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and I'm joined now by John Tamny. He is the editor of Real Clear Markets, one of the sister sites for Real Clear Politics. You can find it at realclearmarkets.com. John, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So, John, you have a piece in today's Real Clear Markets. The headline is, quote, "Better to bomb a city than to bring back manufacturing jobs." And you write in part, in thinking about the manufacturing, mill, and mining jobs that Trump romanticizes, it's easy to forget, that, like Bruce Springsteen, Trump is innocent of all three. If Trump was familiar with the factories, mills, and mines as those who worked in them, he would in no way be promising to bring them back. So I love the Springsteen reference, but you seem to be in fundamental disagreement with just about everyone, including the boss, because it's that everyone wants to bring back manufacturing. They just disagree about how to do it. Don't we need an industrial base for strategic reasons? And what's wrong with what are largely perceived to be good union blue-collar jobs?
There's nothing wrong with them other than the people who had those jobs hated them. That is why, if you look at American culture going back to the 1980s, so many movies came out about how kids were trying to get out of manufacturing, mining, factory towns. And the reason they wanted to is they had older brothers, they had parents who were working in them, they had mothers who were working in them who said, whatever you do, get out of here. You're risking your life going into this kind of work on a daily basis. And so what killed these manufacturing cities was the fact that the talent left. All the people who were most familiar with the jobs got out and went somewhere else.
And so you sort of imply that, just to go back to the boss, he says in his song, they're closing down the textile mill across the railroad tracks. Foreman says these jobs are going, boys, and they ain't coming back. Is the idea, or in your mind, that no matter what Trump does, he can't bring these jobs back?
No, he cannot bring them back. They are long gone and good riddance. If he could bring them back, if they ever come back in the way that they looked in the past, you know that the U.S. will be in major decline and that people will be economically much, much worse off. These were not good jobs. If you look at cities like Aliquippa, PA, the parents who worked in them, the brothers who worked in them demanded that their youth stay out. Tony Dorsett grew up in Aliquippa. His father worked in the J&L steel mills. And he told his kids, he said, if you come in here, you may not leave. Or if you do leave, you could lose an eye, you could lose an arm, you could lose a leg. And he kept telling his kids, do something for yourself and go somewhere else. And so you look at it, going back 100 years, Los Angeles and New York were neck and neck with Flint and Milwaukee for most manufacturing. They all four had major manufacturing bases. Which cities are prosperous today and which ones are not? New York and Los Angeles didn't die for the loss of manufacturing jobs. That's why they're so prosperous. Flint and Milwaukee are shadows of their former abundant selves precisely because they stuck with the past too long.
But don't we need an industrial base? Don't we need manufacturing here? Don't we need to make cars so that if something happens, we'll be able to make tanks? I mean, that's basically the argument people are making about the strategic importance of these kinds of jobs.
Well, the first thing I would say is that if we're importing from around the world, we probably don't need to worry about war ever again because it's rare for someone to shoot at their best customers. It's rare for someone to go after their most prominent buyers. People who are economically integrated generally don't go to war with one another. But strategically beyond that, the most important thing for us strategically is to be the most economically vibrant nation on earth. If so, we will always be able to import whatever we need. We will always be able to build whatever we need. The world is awash in factories. We don't make the phones that we use. If you look at the iPhone that we probably both have, it never touches an American hand until the UPS person delivers it. Everything we do is a function of global cooperation, and I don't think armaments are any different.
And what about semiconductors? Is that a different case? I mean, are those so strategically important that we need to subsidize or have tariffs or something to bring that kind of manufacturing back?
Quite the opposite. Why? Precisely because they're important, we want those most capable of doing that to make them so that we can do what we're doing best. Everything in the world, right down to something as basic as the pencil, is a function of global cooperation. There's no doubt that we could be number one in banana exports. We could be number one in all sorts of things, but at the expense of what? Economics is about trade-offs. That's not theoretical. It's just true. You and I are talking right now. We gave up something so that we could do what we're doing right now. Production is no different. When you divide up with more of the world, what that means is you're able to produce exponentially more. If you go back to Adam Smith's pin factory that he witnessed back in the 18th century, one man working alone could maybe produce one pin per day. Several men working together could produce tens of thousands. And so you want manufacturing to be global. That's the surest sign that what the products and services that the U.S. is creating are being created in massive abundance.
So how do you explain the sort of revival of protectionism, if you will? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and John, you know, a lot of what you've said is what I was taught in graduate school when I studied international relations. But it's certainly out of favor, at least within the Republican Party, strangely enough.
I think the biggest driver of this revival, if truth be told, was George W. Bush's presidency.
Really? Interesting.
It was particularly at the end, it was so economically disastrous. You would never have had a financial crisis if not for the Bush administration's rampant interventions that caused a major economic slowdown. And this is important because when an economy is weak, people look for something, they look for reasons, and they reach out to people who say, I've got a solution for you. If that hadn't happened, I don't think we're talking about this right now. I argued at the time that the problem back in the earlier parts of the 2000s is that inequality wasn't great enough, that we weren't minting enough billionaires. And when we're not, that's a sign that there's actually reduced economic opportunity. Think about the United States. When people move around the U.S., do they move to Flint or do they move to San Jose and Palo Alto? People of all stripes, rich and poor alike in the middle, they move to where the prosperity is. And I would argue there wasn't enough prosperity back then. And so it created this sense of insecurity out there that caused people to look for an answer.
Huh. And how do you view the Trump administration's rollout of this? I mean, they're sort of doing the tariffs now. They want to do tax cuts after that. And I guess there's a sort of deregulatory part of this too. It's sort of a three-legged stool that they're proposing. Is that going to work, do you think?
Well, if he wanted it to work, it would have been wisest to do the one that he's just imposing on us by decree last, get the legislation through first. Obviously, it's going to be a bit more challenging given the outcry about this left and right about what Trump's doing. So if he was going, you'd probably go with tariffs last after getting through the things that people want. So I think strategically it was a big mistake. But you know, with Trump, to defend him, you never know with him. As Arthur Laffer said recently, he said Trump can't lead with his fallback position. And Laffer's point was that he doesn't think Trump wants all these tariffs, that for him it's a negotiation. Now, if I were the one negotiating, I would say, well, we're going to zero, the rest of the world, and you can either follow us, but if you don't, you're going to fall even further behind us economically. We're just going to run away from you. Trump feels that the way to negotiate is to cause pain on us and the other countries. It's not what I would do, but some people think that Trump's hope in all this is that other countries will say, we're going to bring tariffs down substantially so that you can do the same.
And I guess we're seeing some of that. I mean, England or UK has talked about that. Canada's talked about it as well, about dropping their tariffs. If that works, will you look back and say, boy, Trump, once again, the art of the deal? I'm talking to John Tamny, by the way, I should say. He's the editor of Real Clear Markets.
Yeah, I'm going to hate how he did it. I think the way to negotiate this is once again zero. Let's never forget that the open country is always the most prosperous. Hong Kong didn't become what it was through tariffs. It became rich and a magnet for talent precisely because it let everything in. When you're letting everything in, you can do what you do best. Open markets are the academic equivalent of getting to do what you love every day at school and not having to do calculus. They lift everyone. No one is weakened by anti-free trade simply because we're all importers. It could be from across the street, it could be from the other side of the world, but we're all producing so that we can get. All free trade means is that we get to do the work that we do best in return for the things that we want. And so I wouldn't have done it this way, but Trump got elected president. I'm sitting here talking to you, and I'm lucky to be doing that, but he did get elected, and so he knows something that I don't know. Maybe this is the best route to getting the rest of the world to do what it should do, which is reduce barriers to foreign goods.
I'm talking to John Tamny. He's the editor of Real Clear Markets. John, we got about a minute left here. What's next? What do you think happens with the markets, say, over the near term, because we don't know what's going to happen in the long term, but in the near term, are the markets, they seem to be a little concerned about this, to put it mildly. Are institutional investors right to be concerned?
Yeah, you always have to be concerned because barriers to trade limit our ability to be productive. Again, it's the Adam Smith line over and over again. When we're working together, the more hands and machines around the world that you can put to work together, production soars. When you basically throw rocks in the ocean or burn down bridges, there's going to be less production. And so it's understandable that markets would react negatively. I think they were also worried about the problem with a blanket global tariff like this is that you can't work around tariffs. In Trump 1, the tariffs on China meant that that the Chinese would just export through Vietnam. They were fairly easy to get around. This might be a little bit more challenging, so I think that's some of the surprise. But the good news is it's priced. This is a known right now. My sense is things will get better as people realize that this is going to be much harder to enforce than Trump realizes.
Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth, and we have a new feature on the RCP website. It's an interview series from Real Clear Investigations, and it's hosted by Maggie Miller. She talked with Mollie Hemmingway, editor-in-chief of the Federalist News site, who recently testified before the Senate about her experience with what has been called the censorship industrial complex. So here's Maggie Miller in conversation with Mollie Hemmingway.
So you were brought before the Senate committee to speak as a victim, making the case that censorship industrial complex has tangibly hurt your business and your ability to share your work. One of the ways is through advertising starvation, where because of blacklists that you've been placed on, you aren't given money. When did you first notice this sort of censorship, and how has it affected your abilities as a journalist?
I think we first noticed that there was a censorship complex maybe around 2016 or shortly thereafter. That was the year when President Trump kind of surprised everybody by winning. Everyone said that there was no way he could win. And a lot of people came up with a conspiracy theory that Donald Trump had stolen the election by colluding with Russia. And so they wanted to shut down social media or greatly monitor social media or just look at how they could downplay certain stories or amplify others, cut off traffic to some stories, increase traffic to others. And so we started seeing it around then, but it really ramped up, I would say, in 2020, which was a combination of things. There was the COVID pandemic, where if you disagreed with what some federal agencies said about the proper response to the pandemic, you were ruthlessly censored. And then also there were the BLM riots and protests, where if you disagreed with that, we started seeing some major action taken against us at that time. And I just want to say it culminated in that fall with the Hunter Biden laptop story, where there was a whole project to get people to not treat that story like it was a real story. They prepped members of Congress and the media that a story like that might come out. And they said, if it does come out, you should probably censor it. And so it was like the really bad year for censorship.
And so have you noticed a change since the election or since the inauguration of President Trump the second time around, or does the market attitude remain unchanged?
Well, neither. I mean, there's a little bit of a change, but it's still a problem. So you started to see these big media oligarchs, these tech oligarchs say, oh, maybe we went too far when we censored everybody on the right and helped out the left. So we'll tamp it down just a little bit, which does not in any way mean A, that they are, or B, that it's anywhere near sufficient to correct what was done. I mean, Facebook throttled traffic for right of center publications for years. And they said, okay, so we'll give $1 million to Donald Trump's inauguration. Well, that doesn't really matter to publications. and it's also not that, it's not that impressive. And the censorship still goes on. And also it could easily come back. So something needs to be done to protect speech, and so that it's not at the whims of these, tech bros, whether or not we get to have free speech.
And so we're speaking after you delivered remarks at a subcommittee meeting. So what can Congress do to make sure that we have a 50-50 nation represented with viewpoint diversity?
Yeah. So the thing that's interesting about the censorship industrial complex is, first off, understanding how it operates. And so there are lots of ways that the government is involved in the censorship industrial complex. You have federal agencies that sometimes help promote or help develop censorship tools, blacklisting tools. They've given money to help start those companies or NGOs, or they give grants to academic institutions. So all of that should be shut off, and Congress could make sure that they understand they have the power of the purse, and so they could shut off that funding. There's ongoing promotion of these censorship and blacklisting tools and technology that take place at a number of agencies. They could make it illegal for the State Department or other agencies or departments to promote censorship tools. And and just understanding how much that NGO environment is part of this, I think would go a long way to helping stop some of the massive amount of funding.
And so you touched on it a little bit right there, but the government groups that are involved in this operation that almost in some cases may have acted as a piggy bank, what would you say to them?
Well, I mean, they did amazing work supporting the censorship of speech and debate among Americans. They have funded so many of these different entities, again, whether it's universities that have disinformation centers or think tanks or NGOs. It's so many different agencies within the government too: State Department, Homeland Security, Department of Justice, all of them, HHS, they're all involved in some way. And so it should be stopped. The other big concern, though, is because Americans have free speech rights, you're seeing foreign entities be used as a way to do a backdoor censorship of American speech. So the anti-speech community has figured out that if they can change laws in Europe or other parts of the world that force big tech companies to restrict speech for non-Americans, the tools that are put in place can also help restrict speech for Americans. And so I think the US government should be much more bold about fighting back against that international assault on speech, because it goes against Americans' free speech rights.
And then it appears that there is a change of mind with some of these major social media companies who have been really directly involved in this. Obviously, the purchase of X by Elon, Meta supposedly having a change of mind. But has their behavior changed, and what can they do to actually walk that new walk?
I would say the only tech bro, I don't love that the country is seemingly like at the whims of tech oligarchs, but the only oligarch to have had any sort of free speech movement that he seems to really care about would be Elon Musk. He bought Twitter, he changed it to X. The speech restrictions have declined quite a bit on X. What you see with these other tech bro oligarch types is more that they claim that they're changing their viewpoint as opposed to actually seeing that change. For instance, there should be restitution for those companies that were harmed by Mark Zuckerberg's activism on behalf of the left, partly which he did through the funding of two NGOs that were involved in the 2020 election. He gave like $430 million to two NGOs that were involved in the private takeover of government election offices to help Democrats. But much more than that was the shuttering of any traffic whatsoever to news outlets that contradicted his preferred political narrative. And there has, to my knowledge, been no restitution for that, no attempt to make those people whole for what he did. And so when he says like, oh, I've changed my mind, I'm saying a few things that don't really matter, I mean, it's just nowhere near enough to make up for the damage that Facebook and Meta did. And likewise, Google continues to just absolutely shut down any traffic. I can look for an article I wrote under my name with a headline I wrote at my publication, The Federalist, and I can't find it on Google, because that's how awful Google is at making sure that if people are looking for news and information or to get access to an ongoing debate, that they will not get good news and information from one side of the political debate.
Well, as we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to add? Obviously, this is an issue that is near and dear to you because it's obviously affected you, but anything you'd like to say moving forward?
Just that this attack on Americans' speech rights is the worst we've ever had in our country's history. And it's something that Americans really should know more about. It's an attack on the publications and the reporters who are doing this work, but it's an attack on Americans, because if we don't have good news and information, we can't make good decisions. And so it's something that Americans should care much more about than we've seen in past years.
You've been listening to Maggie Miller in conversation with Mollie Hemmingway. You can hear and see more of Maggie's interviews on RealClearInvestigations.com and on the RCP YouTube channel. That's our program for today. On behalf of Carl, Tom, and everyone here at Real Clear Politics, thanks for tuning in. And join us again tomorrow. Have a great night.